In today's episode of the Pathmark Presents podcast, I'm with Aarushi Kaath, and she's the Growth Marketing Manager at Function Point. And we're going to be learning today from her what Function Point is all about, who Function Point is serving, and essentially how she's been growing in her role as well. What I love, if you head over to functionpoint.com, the headline already says it, it's positively productive. And so we want to positively jump into our conversation and learn what Function Point is all about. So Aarushi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Lucas.
Yeah, so maybe give us your 360 overview. What is Function Point all about?
Yeah, Function Point is a local Vancouver-based business. We've been around for a little over 20 years now. And essentially, Function Point offers an all-in-one agency management platform that's aimed at sort of removing the chaos that comes with running a creative agency. We do this by connecting each stage of project management by offering services and features that are not just aimed at project management, but other facets of managing an agency, such as business intelligence, CRM and estimating, agency financials, accounting, team collaboration, so on and so forth. Our aim is essentially to help creative agencies become more profitable and productive, so creatives can concentrate on what they do best, which is being creative.
Very cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about sort of the company? You know, how long have you guys been around? And maybe who you're serving primarily? You're saying it already with the creative agencies, but is that the agency owner? Is that, all employees of the agency? Who is kind of leveraging the tools?
Yeah, we've been around, like I said, for a little over 20 years now. And the product itself is exclusively designed for creative agencies and for internal marketing teams. Within the agencies, we don't talk to just one person, we talk to multiple stakeholders, and that's because it's an all-in-one agency management platform. So we talk to project managers, agency owners, finance administrators, as well as folks on the creative end of things.
Super interesting. So now you're a marketer, essentially marketing to creative agency owners who are super busy, and you're having to find nice ways to engage them, right, on the platform. So I'm curious, how would you describe the journey of somebody hearing about Function Point and getting started? Like, what is the channels that you guys are leveraging, and what have you found to be, a great way of engaging those folks?
Yeah, I definitely say, we leverage our website quite a bit. The thing with purchasing a new project management software or just moving to a new software, it's a huge deal for a lot of agencies, moving to a new software or adopting one for the first time. And a lot of times agency owners are scoping PM software and not realizing that there could be a lot of other problems in their workflows, that they're not aware of. They're scoping for a very specific reason. And sort of that's where Function Point comes in, where we've taken it upon us. It's our responsibility to educate not just creative agency owners, but folks in the creative industry about these problems and what's the best way to make your agency more productive and profitable. So we have in terms of our overall strategy, education is a very, very important aspect of it. We highly emphasize that. And so I'd say, content marketing is a very important part of our strategy as well. So we have a lot of inbound initiatives. It's our growth strategy is embedded in inbound marketing. And so we develop a lot of content, whether that's reports, we do an annual report every year. We do white papers, blogs, we even do templates for PMs and creatives to use to get their project started right from, the start to finish, from briefing to closing a project. So we do a lot of these educational pieces of content. We've also done a lot of webinars for industry folks, and we regularly do webinars for our customers as well. More recently, there's an added emphasis on case studies, because I think when you're picking up a SaaS product, everybody wants to know what's the impact really like. And I think case studies do a phenomenal job of being able to communicate the real impact of a product like Function Point post-implementation. So a lot of educational content marketing.
I want to follow up on one thing there, because we also have other marketers listening who are sort of like picking up insights and tricks, right? From other marketers, not tricks, maybe more like learnings from other marketers. One thing I'm curious about, you mentioned sort of obviously the reports as lead magnets in a way, and they're functioning in that way. What have you been learning? Like, what is still working out there as lead magnets? Is this like actually, is this like a industry report? Is that something that is very focused on the persona? Like, what have you been seeing? Like, how do you think about those?
Yeah, that's a great question. The market is so saturated, especially the creative market, with so much content. What we found is agency owners, so there's different personas, like I said, we target, and each persona is interested in different types of content, which makes it a little bit involved for us in terms of our content strategy. But to give you an example, we do an annual industry trends report. We had to tweak that a little bit this year because last year we had COVID, and so it wasn't a regular industry trends report. So we switched gears and we said, how did agencies perform during COVID? What were the biggest learnings? And we gave comparatives to a lot of agencies to be able to say, hey, this was the performance of agencies for the majority in, let's say, North America. Where do you stand? What's the yardstick really? And that really helps folks like agency owners and finance administrators really figure out where profitability and productivity comes from and where they stand in terms of competition. Whereas for creatives, who are on the creative side and PMs, they want to know a little bit more about efficiency. They want to know a little bit about, how do they run their projects a little bit more smoothly. So that's where templates and things are really handy. But what we've generally found is content and topics associated with improving productivity, staff utilization, billability are really just, they're golden. Everybody wants to know how to do it. Everybody wants to know how to correctly calculate it, profitability at your agency. So I think that's where a sweet spot is for a lot of marketers in the same space.
I see. Super interesting. Let's sort of continue the conversation on where we touched base. We were talking about the website and the role of it and inbound for the company. Maybe tell me your personal perspective on the website. Where do you see the strength of, Function Point's websites? Where do you see room for improvement? We have marketers here always very critical about the websites, want to bring it to the next level. Like, where do you maybe see the biggest room for improvement, and where do you see the biggest strength of the page?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are really very, very critical of our own website internally. So I think before anyone gives us feedback, we kind of already know what's up. In terms of our strengths, I'd say I'd just go back to the educational content because the emphasis is so much. We do a fantastic job of with our content assets. So we have a great resource library of which has a slew of information, educational content. It's also kind of segmented by the journey that the stage of the journey that you're in. So there's a lot of awareness, consideration, and decision level content. So I think we do a great job of that. I think a next level for us, which is something that we're working on currently, is how do we fine tune that messaging by persona. Like I said, we speak to multiple stakeholders in an agency, and we can't keep, talking to agency owners, or we can't just talk to project managers because we are not a siloed product. We're an all-encompassing product. And so tailoring your message by persona as well as stage is a little bit of challenge to find that sort of middle ground. And I think we definitely can improve that. And of course, you're always thinking about a little bit more on the technical side of things. You want to assess from a reporting standpoint all the different touch points, the attribution, and you want to figure out how involved your forms are, for instance. How much are you asking of a lead at a certain stage? So we're always trying to have that conversation internally, trying to optimize, trying to do better. But there's always room for improvement with a website, I've realized, especially in SaaS, because everything's changing so quickly. But as your buyer's journey evolves every few months, it's not always possible to give your website a full revamp, but I think it's a good check to have to see if your buyer's journey is meeting certain touch points on your website, I'd say.
Where do you see sort of the next step for buyer journeys on the website? You mentioned the stages, you mentioned the personas, like, how do you see that coming together on the website? And is that something that is, putting a technical challenge on marketeers at the moment? How do you look at that?
I think, I'll go back to the bit I mentioned about having an attribution model in place. I think that is so very important, but it's also so very difficult. To get a robust attribution model going for you. We were having an internal discussion about our forms and whether our buyer's journey meets the questions we ask on different forms. So on a newsletter. And I think it boiled down to a question of, at this point in time, at this stage, what do I really need to ask this person as a lead to qualify them for this particular action? So whether they're trying to sign up for a subscription of our newsletter, what do I want to ask them? Versus when they're trying to, download a piece of content, maybe I want to ask them about their role, so that when I put them in a sort of nurture campaign, I can give them very personalized content. Versus when they book a demo, and that's when I need to start asking a little bit more of those further qualification questions around, how big is your company, what's your pain points, so on and so forth. So I think that's a constant evolution for our buyer's journey. But what's also an evolution is the buyer journey itself. So the buyer's journey is a great combination of our own assumptions of our buyers, how our buyers purchase, and then of course inputs from our current customers, which is a great proxy for how the next lead would purchase. But the thing is, with things like COVID and all these external factors, everything's changing, right? And how much content they consume and what they're looking at. So that needs to be kept abreast. And it's very operationally challenging. Obviously, it's very resource intensive to keep having these interviews with, but I think that's really important. That's really the key. So you're not letting your assumptions take over a lot of the decisions that you're making with regards to your buyer's journey.
No, I think we're going really in depth here in the buying journey, and I think it's super interesting for marketers to hear. One thing prior to the interview, I was browsing your website a little bit, and I was investigating kind of what you guys are doing, figuring out. And I noticed that you guys are also leveraging ROI calculators, and they obviously also play a part of the buying journey. And funnily enough, it has been coming up more often in the recent interviews. What role does the ROI calculator play for you? Is it kind of like an outdated tool? Is it something that becomes more relevant again? Because it's funnily enough, it has been appearing in a lot of interviews recently.
Right, great question. There's two schools of thought on things like an ROI calculator. One is that it's a fantastic tool to have when you're making a big purchase like a SaaS product, because you really want to be able, before you make that call and have a sales touch, you want to be able to maybe understand, is this the right direction for me? Depending upon how many users I have in my agency or in my organization, is this product, the best? If you're in a consideration stage, making a comparison with a competitor, that's a great tool. The other school of thought is that ROI calculators are they don't give you an estimate. They're so inaccurate in the way they calculate, because there are so many nuances, right? It's not just based off of number of users versus the impact that we've seen historically, and that's what it's based off of. But every agency is so unique, we've come to find. Every agency is built differently, and then we're targeting different industries too. So there's a video production agency versus a full house agency versus an advertising agency, and their needs are so varied and so distinct. Utilizing an ROI calculator to the T becomes extremely difficult and questionable. And so it can work against you, but it can work for you as well. So that's a great question to ask. Good timing, because we're in the midst of we're having internal discussions about whether that's something we want to rely on moving forward versus really just making it a more personalized calculation, so to speak, moving forward.
Interesting. So yeah, because it seems there's a little bit of a revival, but with that same challenge that you were describing. They're very, very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's move on and maybe talk a little bit about yourself, right? There is, you actually mentioned already prior, there's a lot of marketing content out there, a lot of content in general, but obviously on digital marketing as well. Like, how do you decide personally, what is the type of content that you want to spend time with? How do you filter? Maybe tell us, how sort of Aarushi figures out what she should be reading and what she shouldn't.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I went to business school. I did my MBA, and so what happens is when you're in an MBA, a lot of people around you, there's a focus on reading a lot of these business books, and you get deep into it, and there's almost this FOMO that so and so's read this and the other one hasn't. So I did a lot of that a year or two ago, and I've actually weaned off of reading business books for a bit. I think I'm doing more pleasure reading at the moment. But in terms of where I consume marketing content and how I keep myself abreast, I'm subscribed to a bunch of newsletters, and I love to subscribe to local SaaS business newsletters. Vancouver's such a fantastic space to be as far as tech is concerned. People are doing some fabulous things, whether it's startups, growth stage ventures, or established companies. So I really like to see, one, the content in there for my personal learning, but I also like to see how they speak to me as a prospective customer. What are they doing? What are some of the initiatives, they're employing to potentially have a detailed conversation with me tomorrow. So I touch that. So I read a lot of blogs and things like that, from the gurus, so to speak, in the realm of marketing, like Neil Patel and Scott Brinker. But more recently, I'm actually leaning more towards podcasts. With COVID, there's a lot of time spent at home folding laundry, and my personal favorite thing to do is to put on, my AirPods and just sort of tune into a great podcast. And I actually am particularly enjoying How I Built This by Guy Raz. And someone recently introduced me to Under the Influence as well. So that's been fantastic. And I do listen to a bunch of crime podcasts too, but that's probably irrelevant for this conversation. But yeah, podcasts are, I think, a fun new way to consume content, which I'm really enjoying at the moment.
Very cool. Since we're slowly coming to an end of the interview, would love to jump into our rapid fire questions. I already was kind of warning you about them, but now they're coming. So are you ready for them?
Oh, yes, I am. Let's do this.
Very good. What's the last book that you read?
Last book I read was called Fear of Flying it's by Erica Jong.
Mm-hmm. What's the one single thing that your company is focused on the most at the moment?
At the moment, I'd say the most important thing for us is delivering an unmatched customer experience. So I think building a customer experience and customer retention is I definitely say is one of the focal points of our strategy at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Would be no boundaries in technology, what's the one thing that you would want to have fixed for your role today?
Oh my goodness. Oh, that's oh wow, there's so many things I want to do. I think other than maybe testing out, I really like testing out new products and tools and things like that, which make your life easier. Other than doing that, I think going back to what we spoke about briefly, if I could get some sort of robust, bulletproof attribution model in place, that's just, that's it. That would be fantastic. It would be the best gift I get as a customer. As a marketer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
How do I build a robust, bulletproof attribution model?
Mm-hmm. And the last question would be, and I'm quite curious about this one because this is always super educative as well for also people growing their careers, right? So maybe put yourself a couple of experiences back. So when you were not yet a growth marketing manager, but were sort of heading out of education, what's the one advice that you would give yourself? I know you completed an MBA. When you finished the MBA. After finishing the MBA, the day after this, what's the one advice that you would give yourself for your own marketing career?
Oh, there'd be tons. But I'd probably say it's a marathon, not a race. We take ourselves too seriously and we beat ourselves up for making mistakes. I think the idea is to continue making mistakes, continue learning, keep your head down, work harder, and try despite all the failings. And I think I'm saying this out loud to myself as well, just as a reminder, keep trying. I think that never goes in vain.
Very cool. Aarushi, I really appreciate that you took the time with us today to be a part of Path on Presents. I want to give you the very last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about Function Point today, what's the last one thing that they should remember?
I'd say remember that agency owners and agencies shouldn't be bogged down and worried about how to run their agency and operational inefficiencies. That's what Function Point is here for. We want to take that headache off of your plate so you can concentrate on what you do best, which is being creative.
Thanks a lot, Aarushi, for being a guest on Path on Presents.
Thanks for having me.